You're listening to the Angry Marks Podcast Network.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. My name is Arya Whitner, and this is your NXT Takeover Houston War Games audio report. It is Saturday, November 18th, 2017. Thank you all for listening. This is a weird takeover show. I'm going to describe the show to you, tell you everything that happens, and you may think, listening to the individual matches and the individual segments of the show, that the show wasn't that good. However, even if each individual segment may not have been as good as you thought, or maybe it was even a little better than you thought, the show as a whole was a whole lot better than the individual parts of the show. This is, of course, Saturday. It is Survivor Series weekend. Tomorrow I'll be back with the written recap of Survivor Series starting at 5 p.m. with the 2-hour Survivor Series pre-show. But first, on to Takeover. And funny enough, the very first thing seen on the show as the credits roll is a giant banner promoting Kenny Omega, who you might recall does not work for this company. And, yeah. But the in-ring action kicked off with Cassius Ohno and Lars Sullivan. This match didn't even go 5 minutes, and ultimately it was probably the weakest match. In fact, it was the weakest match on the show. However, this was everything it was supposed to be, and then some. Cassius Ohno hit Lars Sullivan with a hard elbow strike in the first 30 seconds of the match, and Lars wasn't fazed in the slightest. And that set the story for the match. Everything that Ohno would try, Lars would shake off and knock Ohno down. The fans were into this and were actually into a lot of they were into a lot of on the show that you'd think they were into the wrong thing, quote unquote. They were into Lars, they were into the Velveteen Dream. We'll get into everyone else they were into later. Sullivan did look good here. He hit a pop-up power slam. So he combined Kevin Owens and Braun Strowman into one fluent move. The most offense that Ohno got in was after Sullivan missed a diving headbutt off the top rope. Ohno used his cyclone kick to finally knock Sullivan off his feet, which was the first time anyone's ever knocked Lars Sullivan off his feet. However, Lars raged up to his feet, begged for more punishment, and Ohno tried to deliver. He went for the rolling elbow. Sullivan ducked it, hit the freak accident, his side Uranage, and picked up the win. Aleister Black up next against Velveteen Dream. This was easily Velveteen Dream's best NXT match so far. However, that's not saying a whole lot, but still. Dream channeled his best Rick Rude for this match, as he wore airbrush tights that had Black's face on one side and Dream's face on the other, harkening back to Rude's feud with Jake the Snake. The fans, as I said earlier, were into Velveteen Dream, but they were just as happy when Black did pick up the win. And this match was, it was pretty good. It's not obviously not Aleister Black's best match ever, but, it was still a pretty darn good match here. The early part of the match, in fact, close to half of the first part of the match, was Dream not even able to connect with a move. Every time he would try something, Black would immediately reverse it or step out of the way. Finally, Dream got tired of being stretched and got in a couple blows. We did get a sequence here, kind of a weird sequence, where Black was in a sitting position on the mat. So Dream stood up and did the Rick Rude hip swivel, which Black ignored until Dream sat down like Black. So Black did Velveteen Dream's grinding motion on the mat, which was only weird because, well, it was weird for a number of reasons, but the main reason why it was weird at first was because the cameras didn't show it. They showed a close-up of Dream's face, getting all wide-eyed and not believing what he saw while Black was off camera. For some reason, I thought Black must have mooned him or something, which is probably the only thing that would have been more out of character than what he actually did. Anyway, Dream finally got in some sustained offense using both a super kick and a rude awakening. Like their TV angle a month ago, Black got tied in the ropes, and this one had the same exact result as Black kicked Dream and got himself out. They kicked out of each other's secondary finishers, including which were Dream's rolling Death Valley driver and Black's running knee. And finally, Black hit the Black Mass, which the cameras missed, to pick up the win. There were a couple times in this show that the camera people were horribly out of position, and the finish here was one of them. Anyway, after the match, Aleister sat down next to Dream on the mat and finally gave Velveteen Dream exactly what Dream had been begging for, and that was for Aleister to say his name, as Aleister said, "Enjoy infamy, Velveteen Dream." By the way, I should point out, at different points during the night, they showed all three teams in War Games backstage getting pumped up, and then showed William Regal walking up to see who was going to start the match. You didn't hear any of this, but that's what we're informed was going on later. Asuka, Funaki, and Finn Balor were shown at ringside for the next match. Behind them were hundreds of empty seats in the hard camera section, and I know some people will disagree with this. However, that's to show that this show was not a sellout, even if they did need extra cameras due to the double ring setup. I've been to shows where I've sat next to the damn camera, so I'm pretty sure if there was a demand for them, they would have sold tickets in those sections. Up next, who was going to become Asuka's successor? Who was going to become the 6th NXT Women's Champion? Would it be Kairi Sane, Peyton Royce, Ember Moon, or Nikki Cross? My pick going into this was Peyton Royce. I think a lot of people picked Royce for the same reasons. That being that Kairi Sane, was too similar to Asuka to really be the successor to Asuka. And Ember Moon, it was just weird if Ember Moon would win the title right away, right after Asuka forfeited the title, because Ember couldn't beat her anyway. And I know nobody could beat Asuka, but still, it just was going to feel weird. And Nikki Cross was basically in the match to lose. And, well, thank God I didn't put money on this thing, because I would have lost some money here. This was a relatively short match, but chock full of big moves, and the crowd was super into this. I got to tell you, 10, 12 minutes of hot spots and big moves, and the only thing that was really messed up was at one point Royce went to roll up Nikki Cross, and somehow, in a way that I still can't figure out now, 2 hours later, Moon somehow got tangled up in the pile, and it looked like both of them were covering Cross at the same time. And so when Kairi Sane ran over to hit a running blockbuster on Royce to break it up, Moon was still covering Cross, but they kind of just ignored that. Anyway, among the big moves that we saw, Ember running wild early with a suicide dive to both Sane and Royce, and then Cross went for Hurricanrana, but Ember blocked it and dropped her with a hard powerbomb on the floor. Royce used her reverse octopus hold in the ropes on Sane, and just, since no disqualification, she was content to sit there and lie there for as long as it took to knock Sane out, but Moon broke it up with a super kick to the ribs. We had the stacked up superplex spot with Royce German supplying Moon, who was superplexing Sane. Everyone hit their finisher. Cross hit the twisting fisherman suplex. Royce used her regular fisherman suplex. Sane hit her insane elbow. Moon broke it up. And then Ember Moon hit the double eclipse on both Nikki Cross and Peyton Royce at the same time. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, Ember Moon follows in the footsteps of Paige, Charlotte, Sasha, Bayley, and Asuka, and is your 6th NXT Women's Champion. The Queen is dead. Long live the new Queen. And Asuka got in the ring after the match to present Ember with her championship. And it'll be interesting to see where we go from here, folks, won't it? We had a commercial for NXT TakeOver Philadelphia. Nothing, extraordinary. You could probably picture what the commercial looked like, because all these commercials, the generic TakeOver commercials, look remarkably similar. It is, of course, the day before the Royal Rumble, and tickets go on sale December 1st. Kevin Owens and Samoa Joe, 2 former NXT champions, were shown at ringside for the next match as Drew McIntyre defended the NXT Championship against Andrade Cien Almas. And you know something? You knew Drew was going to be in for a long night when he came to the ring in his kilt and he had trouble taking it off. 4'6" Zelina Vega got all up in 6'6" Drew McIntyre's navel before the bell, telling off the champion, which led to Almas getting the quick advantage when the bell finally rang. Almas early on lounged in the ropes, which came back to bite him in the ass as Drew kicked him out of the ring. Vega tried to interfere and hit a hurricanrana behind the referee's back, but McIntyre caught her and set her down. Early on, this was almost the reverse of the last match, as instead of hitting big moves, they kept reversing and sidestepping the way out of big moves, saving the big stuff for the end. Drew went for the running powerbomb to the post outside, but Andrade turned it into a hurricanrana, sending Drew face first into the ring post. The fans, by the way, were really into Almas. I think even they were shocked by the finish here. Almas, by the way, broke out a moonsault where he jumped from the top rope over the ring post to McIntyre, who was on the floor. Almas hit his double running knees into the corner twice for 2 different 2 counts, but every time he kept going for his hammerlock DDT, Drew got out of it, including one time hitting a sit-out powerbomb. Almas kicked out of a future shock DDT and finally hit his hammerlock DDT because finally Vega's interference worked. She ran in and hurricanrana Drew behind the referee's back. Drew kicked out of that. McIntyre finally hit the Claymore kick, but Vega put Almas' foot on the ropes. And then, in the shock of shocks, I'll admit I did not see this possibly coming at all. Drew went for a second Claymore kick. Almas ducked. Drew caught himself up on the ropes. Almas hit a hammerlock DDT off the top rope, draping McIntyre, landing on top of his head. Almas made the cover, and yes, in a move that even 2 months ago sounded impossible to believe, Andrade Cien Almas is your new NXT champion, and he celebrated like it was the biggest win ever, and at least in NXT it was. Almas beats McIntyre, picks up the title. He celebrated on top of the announce desk. He got down, and Vega told him to get right back up there and celebrate some more. And so what goes from here? Does Drew go to Raw or SmackDown? I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me. He's only been on NXT since April, since WrestleMania. But, people have lasted shorter amounts of times. And then it was time for War Games, Undisputed Era, Sanity, Roderick Strong, and the Authors of Pain. To remind you, the rules, 1 member from each team starts. The other team members are all locked in separate shark cages. After 5 minutes, the remaining 2 members of one team gets to enter. Every 3 minutes after that, the other 2 members of the other 2 teams get to enter. You can only win via pinfall or submission. And a new one that got added, if anyone leaves the cage They forfeit the match for their team, which I actually thought would somehow come into the finish, but it didn't. The captains of each team actually started the match with Eric Young, Adam Cole, and Roderick Strong. They actually had a metal platform between the two rings in the gap so no one could fall between the rings. Young at first seemed willing to team with Strong against Cole, but Strong punched him in the face and it was on. Cole was about to run and leave the match, but he got stopped, which led to him taking over on both Strong and Young when he crotched them on the top rope. Cole did try to keep each man in separate rings, but even when they weren't, he was on the offensive. Strong finally built some momentum at the end of the period, where instead of doing the coin toss, they did the Elimination Chamber light show, and believe it or not, in a match with two babyface teams and one heel team, the heel team won the man advantage as Undisputed Era got released. This led to 3 full minutes, not 2 minutes, not 90 seconds, not 2 minutes 35 seconds, led to 3 full minutes of Cole, O'Reilly, and Fish beating down both Young and Strong. Young got caught between the ropes and the cage and had to stand there as Undisputed Era took turns running into him. Strong was the victim of wheelbarrow suplex, and then he got smashed into the cage repeatedly. Finally, Authors of Pain were in next, and Fish did his best to hold the door closed, but it didn't work. O'Reilly tried and got a door smashed into his head. Akam and Razor had fun, flinging all 4 men all over the place. Akam actually hip-tossed Cole from one ring into the other, and then both he and Razor backdropped Young into the other ring. Finally, the Authors of Pain picked up their partner and hip-tossed Strong onto all 4 men, which finally got the crowd, who were kind of silent at this point, that finally got the crowd into the match. Young and O'Reilly were tied into the Tree of Woe, and the Authors gave Fish and Cole a Death Valley driver into them. And then finally, Sanity got released, and it was time for the match beyond. Alexander Wolf ran into the cage, and as he stood there 2-on-1 with the Authors of Pain, he pulled out a nightstick he was hiding and beat the crap out of Akam and Razor. Killian Dane found some plunder under the ring, as yes, folks, War Games went hardcore. Dane was about to get in the ring, but the fans were chanting for tables, so Killian did as he was told and put 2 tables into the cage. And this was just... the whole match went at least 30 minutes. I didn't have a stopwatch. I wasn't timing it. And, I mean, this was 11 minutes into the match when all 9 people were in the match. And so this was a good 20 minutes of pure, unadulterated chaos. And it was beautiful. WWE matches, I think we've all felt the same way about a lot of current day matches, is like it's very choreographed. It's very predictable. It's not a whole lot. It's not very gritty, not very raw. But this match, whether you love it or you hate it, and I don't know how you're going to hate it, but if you do, you got to admit, this was so different than everything else that WWE has put on in, years. I can't even remember the last thing that they did that was just so uniquely different than everything else they were doing. This was a chaotic brawl. They, in one night, tried to make Killian Dane a star. I don't know if it worked. It didn't quite work at the level of Pete Dunne and Tyler Bate earlier this year, but Dane destroyed everybody. This was Killian Dane's time to become a star, and he took that opportunity and ran with that ball. And if he becomes a big star, this will be the match that everyone points to and says, this was the beginning of Killian Dane's role. At one point, Dane did a corner drop kick onto one Author of Pain and fell with a back senton onto the other. and then did a flying crossbody onto pretty much everyone else in the match. Fish kicked Dane in the legs, but he got laid out, and Dane did a Michinoku driver to Adam Cole on top of Bobby Fish, which I'm telling you, I'm not Bobby Fish, but that could not have felt good. Dane and Razor both did a combination Samoa drop fall-away slam to multiple opponents, and then Razor decided to test Dane. Akam laid him out with a running power slam, which finally took Dane out for a few minutes. Undisputed Era hit a 3-man chasing the Dragon on Strong, but couldn't make the cover, as no one at this point could get any sustained offense, as every time they would hit a big move, they'd turn around and get hit with their own. In what turned out to be the only submission attempt in the whole match, Strong tied Wolf up with a chain. Actually, O'Reilly tied Wolf up with a chain and locked on an armbar, but Eric Young broke that up with a diving elbow drop, which Fish broke up the ensuing pin with a moonsault on the pile. Authors of Pain did a super collider to Fish and Young, where Dane was caught in the middle of it somehow. But Young came back with a Death Valley driver to Akam, and he threw him on top of Razor. Roderick Strong decided that 20-plus minutes into the match, this was the time for him to go backbreaker crazy, as he hit a backbreaker on just about everybody, but actually finished with an angle slam on Killian Dane. Cole somehow ended up sitting on the ring post between the cage, and it appeared to lead to his demise, as everyone kind of climbed up after him, but somehow that instead led to a double stacked up superplex with the other 8 people, and Cole somehow being left all alone. Cole celebrated, being left all alone and outsmarting everyone, when Akam and Razor woke up and both looked at him. And Cole saw his future. Akam and Razor set up the 2 tables that Killian Dane had previously put in the ring. They'd set it up in the other ring, and they set to give Cole a back suplex through the tables, when that was shockingly broken up by Alexander Wolf, who then put Razor through both tables with a German suplex, which busted open the back of Wolf's head. Dane woke back up and hit the world's biggest Van Terminator trademark, as he went corner to corner with a drop kick to O'Reilly, who had a garbage can in his face. Cole at this point had scurried to the top of the cage, and they were saying that, of course, if he went down the other side, he would eliminate his team. However, he was shimmying across the cage, and he ended up on one of the corners. He stood up, shouted his name, shouted that he was Adam Cole, baby, and seemed poised to dive until he saw Roderick Strong standing there. And Roddy put the fear into Cole and climbed up after him. Both men ended up on top of the cage, with the fans chanting, "Please don't die." Strong then hit a superplex off the top of the cage, and both the men landed on top of everyone else, who were all standing there to catch him. Authors of Pain hit a version of the last chapter to Dane while in between the rings on the metal ramp. Everyone hit a big move on everyone until Cole, Strong, and Young were the only 3 people left. Yes, the 3 people who started the match were the 3 people at the end of the match, as Strong beat on Cole until Young recovered and wheelbarrowed him into the cage. Cole grabbed the kendo stick, waylaid Young with it, and used a steel chair-assisted running kick to pin Eric Young and give the victory in War Games to Undisputed Era. So, long story short, no, this was not the NWA WCW War Games, but it was a masterful 30-minute brawl full of twists, turns, and, oh yes, plenty of chaos. So that does it from Houston. I want to thank you all for listening. Make sure to check out this show, and make sure to check out my Survivor Series recap tomorrow night. And I'll talk to you again on Wednesday night.
You're listening to the Angry Marks Podcast Network.